I request Mr. M.J. Akbar, Mr. Tariq Mansoor, and the worthy director of Khusro Foundation and President of India Islamic Culture Center, Mr. Siraj Qureshi, to come over the stage. Please come. इससे पहले कि हम लेक्चर सुने, दो तीन चीज़ें हैं जो कि होनी चाहिए हम सबकी तरफ से, और ख़ास तौर पे जमशेद साहब ने उसकी तरफ हमारी तवज्जो भी दिलाई थी। हमने उसका पहले से इंतज़ाम कर रखा था उनकी डांट से बचने के लिए। मैं गुजारिश कर रहा हूँ जनाब सिराज कुरैशी साहब से कि वो एम.जे. अकबर साहब की खिदमत में गुलदस्ता पेश करें। हमारे दो डायरेक्टर्स जनाब रोहित खेड़ा इस वक्त दुबई में हैं और रंजन मुखर्जी साहब अपनी वालदा के इलाज के लिए कलकत्ते में हैं, इसलिए वो नहीं हैं। तो मैं उनकी कमी को पूरा करने के लिए गुजारिश करूंगा जनाब जमशेद साहब से कि वो तशरीफ़ लाएं और जनाब तारिक मंसूर साहब की खिदमत में गुलदस्ता पेश करें। जी ये अलीगढ़ के वाइस चांसलर नहीं है, मेरे भी वाइस चांसलर है, चूंकि मैं अलीगढ़ ही का प्रोडक्ट हूँ। और एक बात और भी बता दूं कि इनके वालिद जो थे वो फैकल्टी ऑफ लॉ के डीन थे। इनके बड़े भाई जो थे इंजीनियरिंग में 32 साल की उम्र में फुल फ्लैज यूनिवर्सिटी प्रोफेसर हुए, बाद में सऊदी अरब गए और जामे हमदर्द के वाइस चांसलर रहे प्रोफेसर रशीद उज़फ़र साहब। तो मामला ये है कि तमाम के तमाम जो हैं रिकॉर्ड जो हैं वो इनके यहाँ मौजूद हैं, जिसके लिए इनको मुबारकबाद देते हैं। नाउ वो कहते हैं कि नाले बुलबुल शैदा तो सुना हंस कर, अब जिगर थाम के बैठो कि मेरी बारी आई। एम.जे. अकबर साहब को सुनने के लिए हम सब बेताब हैं और जानना चाहते हैं कि व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ द मॉडर्निटी इन आवर टाइम्स। जनाब एम.जे. अकबर, आई रिक्वेस्ट हिम टू कम एंड एनलाइटन ऑल ऑफ अस।
बहुत शुक्रिया अख्तर भाई, बहुत शुक्रिया तारिक भाई, आप यहाँ पे इतनी दूर से आए। सिराज भाई, आपके सदारत में और आपके मौजूदगी में ये मौका मिला, आपने ऐसा इदारा बनाया है। बहुत कम मैं देखता हूँ कि अपने, सच्ची बात तो ये है कि बहुत कम अपने कौम में ऐसे इंस्टीट्यूशंस होते हैं जो इतने उभर के और कायम रहे। शुरू तो सब कुछ अच्छा होता है। Friends, let me thank you for coming in such large and such a warm presence. It's truly uplifting that one sees an audience which is so visibly engaged and engaged intellectually in a subject that I do believe is one of the most, or represents one of the most important challenges that we face at this moment. Let me make one thing very clear, and it is based on a relationship of master and subject, not a relationship of equality. Let us not fool ourselves. Let us not romanticize ourselves. It was based on a relationship of master and subject, but along certain what might be called inbuilt conditions. The colonial empire was based on a new value, the value of trade, the value of currency, the value of what we might actually be called artificial values. Wealth was defined by banknotes. Banks were a new phenomenon that came in. One of the reasons why the banks began to flourish and the Jewish people became the principal bankers was because the Christians would not allow Jews to own land in Europe. They would not allow to own homes in Europe. And therefore they had to actually create other forms of wealth, particularly forms of wealth that could travel. They went to the extent of creating an artificial value for stamps, the penny black syndrome, or diamonds. These were all created as terms for wealth transfer. How did the British colonialists, the people Clive himself called the most corrupt city in the world is Calcutta. If you want to learn more, and I hope you want to learn more, not only for the sake of learning, but in the hope that you'll actually buy a few of my books, is, Dulali Sahab and the Black Zamindar. You will find chapter after chapter explaining how wealth was transferred. They would hide the most diamonds in the shape, in the heel of the shoe, and take it away and create value. Everybody knows about the Kohinoor, but I don't think many people know that the diamond on Napoleon's pommel on his sword was also a diamond from Golconda, taken by one of the governors of Madras, stolen from one of the governors of Madras and taken. So this creation of artificial value, the consequences, why the Black Zamindar? Dulali Sahab and the Black Zamindar. The Black Zamindar, for a very simple reason, that the British could not have ruled India without the collaboration of Indians. They were the comprador class. They were the class that were converted into zamindars. They were the class that became the most active elements of their economic system, of their cultural mores, of their academic system. They are the class who actually, one of the most shocking things about Indian history, I tell you honestly, if you look at British rule, the one thing you will find from the beginning right up to the end is the continued repetition, not simply of famine. Famine to, akal to har samay hota tha. But the exploitation of famine and the millions of deaths. British rule really became an active, genuine rule in 1765 when Warren Hastings and company got the zamindari of the whole of Bengal. Bengal us zamane mein included Odisha and large parts of Bihar. In 1770, Warren Hastings is writing back to the board of directors. 1769-70 में बहुत बड़ा अकाल आया था, बहुत बड़ा. That one-third of Bengal has died in the famine. Now just imagine it. One-third of Delhi, one-third of anything, dying of hunger. It is not dying of sword, gas, gunfire, machine guns. It's dying of hunger. The most painful way to die is dying of hunger, as you will realize if you don't eat for the next 3 days. And he writes that the revenues of 1771 have actually increased the pre-famine levels. How and why? Because we used violence upon the dead and the dying. और वहां से लेके Bengal famine of 42-43 is the same story. But have you asked yourself one thing? Why are there no histories of famine in our schools? Why? Because those who wrote the history for our children, for those of you sitting here, were protecting some memory of a past in which they were also guilty. They were also culpable. This psychological impact of the British Empire upon both Hindus and Muslims was quite significant. I'll mention it just in passing. Both, to an extent, began to search for a golden age. The Hindu intellectual communities began to search for a golden age that was both pre-British and pre-Mughal and pre-Sultan. And the Muslims fell into the trap of what I have described elsewhere, into the romance of regression, where imagined realities was dreamt up into a kind of dream reality. सब एक ज़माने में जन्नत था, ये खराब हो गया, वो खराब हो गया, and we can recover. And the shorthand, as I said, the alibi was that if we go back and create religion as the basis of our polity, we will return to the dream. In fact, those of you, I'm sure most of you know, that apart from the Medina period, the few years of the Medina period, the Muslims immediately split back into feudalism, whether it was the feudalism of the Umayyads in Damascus, or whether it was the Abbasids in Baghdad, or Umayyads again in Spain, and so on and so forth. Yes, there was glory. There was glory for many centuries, but there was no reform. And the absence of reform eventually took its toll when the Industrial Revolution took the West far ahead. अब आप सोचिए, the wealthiest empires are the Ottoman and Mughal. Why does the Industrial Revolution come in the West? It's important for us to actually understand this, because when we come to the larger thesis, these elements, I hope, will become a pattern. The answer is very important and very interesting. The fulcrum of the Industrial Revolution lay in an invention in the middle of the 15th century. It was called the printing press. Now, the printing press by itself, printing press did not discover printing. It was a technological advance into mass printing. Printing was into mass printing. Now, what did mass printing do? Mass printing democratized knowledge and transferred knowledge to a middle class. And this middle class emerged via the church in the beginning, but then into schools. The relationship between church and schools was always close in every society. Just as the schools and madrasas and so on, there was a relationship there. This printing press democratized knowledge and created a middle class which used the power of knowledge to create inventions and so on and so forth. Why did the Ottoman or the Mughal empires not create a similar middle class? What prevented them? It was certainly not economic wealth. They had enough economic wealth. What prevented them? The answer will surprise you and I hope shock you. Trade unions. Katib jo tha, the scribe who wrote the records of the empire, he felt threatened कि printing पे आ जाएगा तो मेरी नौकरी जाएगी. And therefore, अच्छा, is there anything in Islam which prevents you from printing? No. But in the Ottoman Empire, here same thing. वहाँ पर भी it didn't come till the 18th century. And here it was needed William Carey and so on to make it into a phenomenon. So the price that is paid by absence of reform in any age is absolutely huge. And we are, of course, paying the price of that now. Europe's industrial revolution came. Europe's political revolution also came along with the industrial revolution. What was the political revolution? There are many aspects of it, but if you want to use a shorthand which is convenient for the time that we have, then I think the best definition of that would probably be the French Revolution. Not so much the American Revolution, because it was isolated, it had its own characteristics, and in any case the American Revolution was very profound in its ideas but never extended freedom to the slaves. But let me tell you something about the European Revolution, because it affected us. The European Revolution, French Revolution, built on liberty, equality, fraternity. Powerful ideas. What happened? It was first eaten up by its own children, Danton and company, and what was left was eaten up by Napoleon. The French relapsed into the age of empire, not into the age of liberty. And the ideas actually went into hibernation with periodic outbursts. However, the ideas remained and had a force of their own. But let me tell you something. Equality is a great idea, but the equality never extended to women. Never extended to women. The woman, the wife, was actually the property of husband. Islam was far more reformed in this respect. Now, let me tell you something that I hope will again shock you. And those of you who would like to, please remember it and repeat it in your conversations. Switzerland only gave women the vote in 1971. 1971. France gave women the vote in 1948. The law was still the law of the feudal elites and the rich. What do I mean by that? One example. You could be hanged in the 19th century for stealing one sheep in Britain. Was it because the crime was eating mutton or meat? No. The crime was wool, because wool was the biggest export. So you were actually stealing the revenues of the rich. All laws were made for an elite. Feudalism is governance of, by, and for the elite. That was the reality into colonial times until the ideas of reform. What is the Gandhi Revolution? Please take only two things away. One aspect of it is so well known that I don't want to waste too much time repeating it, that India has to be a secular state, and that is an obvious given. Anybody who challenges the secularism of India will damage this country. Damage this country beyond repair. Let us have no illusion of it. And I want to define secularism also. Secularism for me is not the Western secularism. Secularism is basically the idea of freedom of faith. That everybody, irrespective of what you may believe in, you have the right. You have the right to believe in non-belief. The right to atheism is part of freedom of faith. The right to practice it, not just to believe it. I'll come to this a bit later. So that part of Gandhiji's message is well known. But the really radical aspect of Gandhiji's message was the creation of a government whose principal and fundamental duty would be the elimination of poverty. Now, to us it seems a given, but 100 years ago, 1920 and 2020, 100 years ago, this was an extremely radical idea, because throughout history, and I'm telling you exceptions apart, you may treat the Medina model as an exception, you may treat other instances also as exception, but the broad reality is that till this time, governance was meant for the welfare and the nurture, creation of the elites. To actually, आप यहाँ पर खद्दर hopefully आप भी पहने हैं, मैं भी पहना. Apart from comfort, आजकल fashionable भी हो गया. Now why खद्दर? It's very important to understand. क्यों खद्दर? There was a great debate between Gandhiji and the leftists. And the leader of the leftists was Jawaharlal, his own heir. The debate was that shall we address the problem of poverty now, or can it be addressed now, or do we need to seize power and seize the state before we can address poverty? The leftists, taking the Leninist view, is that unless you seize the state and change the government, you can't have it. Right? Gandhi says, no. People are dying in front of me. Poverty has no religion. They are Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs. Peasants are dying in front of me in hunger. आधा पैसा नहीं है उनके खाने के लिए. He said they can't wait for the British to leave. And therefore he created the spinning wheel, charkha and khaddar as some form of a second income, parallel income, and made it into the symbol of Indian nationalism. So address the problem now. In fact, it is because of Gandhiji that I hope you realize this, that one of the most fundamental, basic responsibilities and duties of every government of India is the alleviation of poverty. It is there in the Constitution. It's a constitutional duty. I often have wondered that somebody should have done a PIL in the Supreme Court and asked for the resignation of government because it has not done enough for the poor and therefore betrayed its constitutional requirement. Right? And this really began. That is what made the Indian freedom movement into the unique movement. It is not just non-violence. It was the conversion of the idea of freedom into a mass aspiration, into a mass movement. And that happened with non-cooperation and with Khilafat and with this and other variations, with the Salt March and Quit India. That is, the British eventually left not because there was an army of uniform. The British left because there was an army of Indian anger that had risen, that was no longer ready to accept what was unforgivable. So India became the classic battleground between the idea of secular nationalism and theocratic nationalism. Both succeeded. I'll just briefly touch upon one thing. Our understanding of this important part of our history is so trapped in individuals, Gandhi, Jinnah, ye, wo, that we sometimes, very often, we do not see what they represent. It's the difference between the Gandhian movement and the League was not in people. I mean, I'm sure there was sincerity on all sides, whatever they did or didn't do, whatever mistakes they made or didn't make. It was the idea. The Muslim League emerged as a byproduct of the agriculturist party of UP. It was essentially a party with the mentality of landlords. That was the fundamental problem, not simply the idea of religion. You would be, again, I hope, surprised by the fact that till today there is no land reform in Pakistan. Because poverty was never a basic compulsion. That means economic equity was never a basic compulsion of the state. And today, if the country is going through the throes which we see every day in the news, it is because the idea itself does not have the legs to travel through the difficult terrain of history. And therefore, it stumbles. Therefore, it cannot find cogency. On the other hand, Bangladesh, which moved out of theocratic nationalism, has found a path forward. Same people, same ideas, same everything. And if you want to understand that it is not religion which makes one a good neighbor and the other a bad neighbor. The Muslims of Bangladesh are as fervently Muslim as anywhere else in the world. As fervently Muslim. But I would suggest, we are in Delhi here, so it's too far away. Whenever you go to Calcutta, take a day trip and go to the Bangladesh border. कलकत्ते से 1-1.5 घंटे का रास्ता है बेनापोल में. वहाँ जाइएगा तो 15 मिनट 20 मिनट में सलाम दुआ करके सब ठाक ठोक करके आप पार हो गए. आप अतारी जाइएगा तो 10 हफ्ते तक आपका नाम और निशान नहीं नजर आएगा. एक तरफ बर्फ है और दूसरी तरफ हमदर्दी का सैलाब है. ये है फर्क. लोग वही हैं, लेकिन देखें हाउ एन आइडिया shapes, converts the same people into one reality of the other. And I'm saying it publicly. If we fall into the trap of believing that religion can be the basis of state, we will also self-destruct. We will also self-destruct. This fact, by the way, of pluralism is not limited to every community found a doctrine. After all, for most of Mughal rule, or actually Mughal rule should not be called Mughal rule. It was in reality a Mughal Rajput rule. But most of it was determined by the concept of Wahdul Wajud, the unity of all existence. And they believe that the famous fatwa of Sheikh Mahibullah al-Abadi, which he gave to Shah Jahan, which they periodically renewed, that any ruler who believes that the Prophet was sent as a blessing for all humanity. कहीं लिखा है कि that the Prophet was sent for the blessing for only some people? No. He was sent as a blessing for all humanity. The ruler has no right to discriminate against anyone. That was the fundamental political outcome of these ideas. And this was extended very powerfully into the question which was actually posed by Shivaji when he wrote the famous letter to Aurangzeb on the return of jizya. He says, but the Holy Quran describes Allah as Rabbul Alameen. Allah is not described as Rabbul Muslimin. He has created me as much as anyone else. That we may have differences of religion, differences of power, is another matter. As a ruler, you have no right to discriminate. In fact, I would like to draw your attention to another fact which illuminates. There are some facts of history which throw a light on larger realities. So, 1803, Shah Waliullah ke bete, I think Shah Azizuddin. Shah Abdul Aziz. First time a fatwa was given that India has become Darul Harb after the British took Delhi. अब मुझे एक बात बताइए, there was never been an instance in the previous where anyone, anywhere, declared any part of India as Darul Harb. Never. तो आप क्या समझते थे कि जहां पर राजपूत हुकूमत करता था वहां पर मुसलमान नहीं थे? यहाँ जहां मराठा करते थे वहां मुसलमान नहीं थे? या जहां मुसलमान थे वहां हिंदू नहीं थे? Everyone lived together. There was no need, because freedom of religious practice, and even if it was token participation, the Sindhiyas famously हर मुहर्रम में उनका ताज़िया निकलता था, इसलिए नहीं कि वो मुसलमान बन गए थे या शिया बन गए थे, बट इसलिए कि एक हमारे लोगों का एक जब जलसा निकलता है, मातम का जलसा है, खुशी का तो नहीं, जब मातम का जलसा निकलता है तो हमें वहां उनके साथ शामिल होना जरूरी है, बहुत सिंबॉलिकली एंड इन रियलिटी। जब नवाब मुर्शिदाबाद होली खेलते थे तो किस लिए खेलते थे? क्योंकि उससे इमोशनल बॉन्ड्स अपने प्रजा ही था के साथ बनता था। So this was the spirit which had actually ruled India long before colonialism. I just want to take one quote of Gandhiji before I move. I will respect your time. Gandhiji, और ये 1939 में 1939 when the question of the two nation theory became first 1940 में फिर पाकिस्तान रेजोल्यूशन और दूसरा डिबेट एकदम चढ़ गया था. And Gandhiji writes in a letter to somebody who has been advocated. He says, why is India not one nation? Was it not one during, say, the Mughal period? Is India composed of two nations? Well, if it is, why only two? Are Christians a third nation? Parsis a fourth nation? Are the Muslims of England a different nation from other English? Are they Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, not all Punjabis in Punjab, drinking the same water, breathing the same air, and deriving the sustenance from the same soil? So where does this fact of creating a nation in the name of difference, when we have such a flowering and such opportunity and such a future to behold by being together? Unfortunately, Gandhiji lost this battle to keep India united, with consequences that we are all aware of. It was a battle when the creation of a minority consciousness has a very interesting history also. I'll take just a minute to throw some light on it. It first came to the fore in 1870. Before there was identity consciousness, of course. कोई नमाज पढ़ता है, कोई मंदिर में जाता है, कोई गुरुद्वारा में जाता है, obviously. But as a political consciousness. क्यों? Because 1870 there was the first census of India. And that census actually revealed that Muslims were in a majority in Bengal. Before that there was no, it was not part of political consciousness. किसको पता था? That led to a series of decisions by the British in converting it into a political weapon. वहाँ से आप देखिए, अभी 1880-90, 15 साल के अंदर 1904, the Muslim League is created in the home of Nawab Salimullah in Dhaka, not anywhere else. Right? Aligarh में नहीं बना, Dhaka में बना. So, and from there, it was the separate electorates and so on and so forth, everything to divide the two nations. And this is what became the biggest challenge that Gandhiji had to face and theocracy became the burqa of elitism. Under it, the practices of converting a nation into the, what shall I say, handmaiden of a privileged class. From these ideas, we get what I call the establishment of modernity. The first Constitution of India was written in 1928 by the Motilal Nehru Commission. 1930 में पूर्ण स्वराज होता है लाहौर सेशन में 1929-30. 1931 कराची में कांग्रेस की सेशन होते हैं, and Gandhiji's resolution. Please, if those who would like to, should read that resolution, because the basic principles of the Indian Constitution are there. And what are these constitutions? If we take the three principles of the French Revolution, liberty, fraternity, equality, we now have to add a fourth, modernity. Now, modernity is a very nice term to use, but what does it mean? For me, modernity has four basic non-negotiable principles. Number one, you have to have democracy. And democracy means freedom to express your political opinion, your vote, without fear, without suppression. That is fundamental. Freedom of conscience, freedom of voice. Second principle of democracy, freedom of faith. Without freedom of faith, without the right to exercise your faith as you wish to exercise it, right, is a fundamental. Is by these standards, China may be a successful country, but it is not a modern country. Because China does not have democracy. China does not have freedom of faith. We can take Chinese communists and they can stay here because we have freedom of atheism. But they cannot accept freedom of Muslims to practice their faith. Or freedom of Hinduism or freedom of Buddhism. Third, principle of modernity, gender emancipation. You cannot be a modern nation without the emancipation of women. That is absolutely, that age is gone, where you can keep women at home as part of domestic labor. That age is gone. It's over. Finish it. And let's not fool ourselves by pretending that this law exists or that law exists. I just repeat, because I said it in Parliament also, I have no hesitation whatsoever in repeating that if you think that the Sharia is immutable, right, then you don't even understand that there are at least 4 schools of Sharia acknowledged. So there is no one Sharia law interpretation. And there may be many more. There are many more. In any case, there has been reform because the right of reform is also included in our doctrines, in Islamic doctrine. I'll give you a very simple example. There are at least 20-30 verses in the Quran Sharif which says that the hands of every thief must be cut. Do we do it? We don't do it. Why don't we do it? Because at that time, the punishment had to be harsh to prevent the crime. Today, the environment has changed and that similar crime can be prevented by other means. And that's all there is to it. So, reform in every home, the right of women to become actually more educated. We give them the right, they will become more educated. The right to work, to become productive elements of society is essential to modernity. And of course, the fourth which I have already dwelt on, and I will not repeat: economic equity. I don't think there's any society is going to have economic equality, but economic equity. And the poor of our country have a right to ask. 75 years ago, you said that you were bringing freedom in order to free me, liberate me from hunger. Not just liberate me from the British. That is the easy part, comparatively. You also had freedom to liberate me from hunger. Why has it not happened? They have a right to ask. What are we going to wait for 75 years more? One of the success stories of the present regime is actually the concentration in removing the pain of hunger through Swachh, through kitchen, and so on and so on. Through the largest humanitarian scheme I can think of, which is giving food to the poor during COVID. That is something that takes us forward. So these four are basically essential to creation of a modern state, and it is this which actually is going to make Indians into a worthy presence at the high table of world affairs. I began with a slight challenge by asking you to consider which is the starting date of a century, just to get your mind working, that please do not confuse the obvious with the truth. हर चीज जो सामने नजर आती है वो सच नहीं होती. अब थोड़ा सा आप नजरिया बदल ले तो एक उससे बड़ा सच नजर आता. So here's another challenging question: where the Muslims are minority under Mughal rule. Where Indian Muslims are minority under Mughal, let us be honest, they were not. Why were they not? The numbers were the same. In fact, they were less. Because minority and majority is not a function of numbers. It is a function of empowerment. If I feel empowered, I don't see myself as a minority. Which Brahmin of India sees himself as a minority, and there cannot be more than 2% of them? They're socially empowered. Now, the good news for those of us on the subcontinent on India is that democracy is the only polity which leads to empowerment without violence. Marxism may also lead, but it requires violence. It's inbuilt into it. And this is where we have an opportunity in order to become genuine, equal participants in that great story. A story which I'm telling you, and I'm not doing it because I have to sound one thing or the other. I do it out of conviction. Whatever I say it out of conviction. And I tell you, our nation has the future, is the future of this century. Because our nation has got its basic principles right. It may not always have the people who implement the principles right, but it has got the principles right. Thank you.
बहुत शुक्रिया अकबर साहब. मैं इस्लामिक स्टडीज़ के एक तालिब इल्म की हैसियत से आपकी बात की तायीद करता हूँ, और आपसे बहुत पहले इस बात को शेखुल इस्लाम मौलाना हुसैन मदनी ने देवबंद से कहा था. जब जिन्ना साहब ने कहा था कौमें मज़हब से बनती हैं, तो शेखुल इस्लाम ने दारुल उलूम देवबंद के शेखुल हदीस के मनसब से कहा था कौमें मज़हब से नहीं वतन से बनती हैं. और अगर वतन से नहीं बनती तो जो अकबर साहब कह रहे थे, फिर मुझे पासपोर्ट और वीज़े की ज़रूरत क्यों होती है दूसरे इस्लामी मुल्क, सो कॉल्ड इस्लामी मुल्क में जाने में. मैं सो कॉल्ड कह रहा हूँ, मैं उस इस्लामी मुल्क की कह रहा हूँ. तो बुनियादी तौर पे ये बात इन्होंने कही. मैं इनका शुक्रिया अदा करता हूं आपकी तरफ से भी, और इन्होंने जो कुछ कहा है उस पर आप सोचेंगे और ख़ासतौर से नई नस्ल सोचेगी बुनियादी तौर पर। अब मैं गुजारिश कर रहा हूं इंतहाई अदब और एहतराम के साथ आप सब की तरफ से और अपनी तरफ से आज के सदर मोहतरम प्रोफेसर तारिक मंसूर साहब से कि वो तशरीफ़ लाएं और अपने सदारती कलमात से हमें महदूद व मुस्तफ़ीज़ फरमाएं। प्रोफेसर तारिक मंसूर।
जनाब MJ अकबर साहब, सिराजुद्दीन कुरैशी साहब, अख्तुल वासी साहब और मोअज़्ज़िज़ हाज़रीन, अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड गुड आफ्टरनून टू ऑल ऑफ यू एंड नमस्कार ऑल्सो। देखिए, सबसे पहले तो मैं अख्तुल वासी साहब को और सिराजुद्दीन कुरैशी साहब को और बाकी जो डायरेक्टर्स हैं दो, उनको मुबारकबाद देता हूँ कि इस प्रोग्राम को, इस लेक्चर को उन्होंने ऑर्गेनाइज किया, एंड आई ऑल्सो वांट टू थैंक देम फॉर इनवाइटिंग मी टू प्रिजाइड ओवर दिस। MJ अकबर साहब जो हैं वो, उनकी बहुत डीप नॉलेज है चीज़ों के बारे में, और ये नॉलेज जो है वो हफ्ते 10 दिन में, 1 महीने 2 महीने में नहीं आती पड़ के। ये नॉलेज उन्होंने एक्वायर की है वो 40-50 साल जो उन्होंने स्टडी किया है, तो किसी भी टॉपिक पे बोल लेते हैं और एक्सटेम्पोर बोलते हैं, चाहे वो हिस्ट्री हो, चाहे वो कॉन्टेम्परेरी सब्जेक्ट्स हो, चाहे वो फिलॉसफी हो। He is not only a great journalist, but he is also a great author also. Once I went to his office, so he presented me a book, which is titled Blood Brothers. So it is a book about his family, about his grandfather, about his father, about his brothers, about his mother. So I read that book. How his mother is actually Kashmiri actually, and they said when she was married to his father, they were settled in Amritsar actually, and how she came from there to the suburbs of Calcutta after her marriage. So it was a very readable book, though it is just about a family, but the way he presented the things there. So he is a very distinguished author and journalist, and if you talk to him one-to-one, then it is a great pleasure, because you always learn from him, but then you have to inquire about and you have to elicit things from him. So once I asked him that in partition so many people were killed, he said they have to be killed. Once the chaos occurs, anarchy occurs, then there is no law. Things will happen like that only. And he is very right that we are a secular, tolerant society. Once I was sitting with him in Connaught Place. The ambassador of Denmark was also with us at that time. So once somebody we were talking about India and other things. He said India is a very secular country. Why it is secular? He said, I am giving you an example. If it was not secular, we will not be sitting together. All people of one religion would be sitting at one place, and I and you would have been sitting in some other place, in some area which was partitioned or segregated area. So he has a deep knowledge of things. I think it was a wonderful lecture, a very lucid presentation, and all of us have learnt a lot from him. And he is very right that the democracy is the essence of modernism. Without democracy, you cannot say that you are a democrat, a modern state. As he mentioned, that China may have made a lot of economic progress, but the society is opaque. There is no democratic ethos in China. We even don't know how the COVID came from there, whether it was from the laboratory or it was from the bat or anything. So much opacity is there in the system. Even if they say something which is correct, people doubt. The other thing which he has rightly mentioned is about the women's rights. No country or society or community can be modern if it does not allow 50% of its population not to work, not to progress, not to get educated. So gender right and gender equality is very important for anybody to say that we are a modern society. And he is very correct in saying that modernity is about mind, not about clothes and other superficial things. As a medical teacher, I know that some of my students who were wearing hijab, they were so intelligent. Their English was far superior than to the other girls. Their clarity of mind, their IQ. So I don't think it has anything to do with these things. It is how you think, how you behave, how you deal with others. And if you have to have modern thinking, if you are a PhD, but you don't know how to behave properly, you are not a modern person, not an educated person. So it is how we behave with others, how we behave within the family, how we treat our family members, how we treat our neighbors, how we treat our colleagues. I think these are all aspects of modernity. He's very rightly pointed out that the Ottoman and the other empires, Mughal Empire, Ottoman Empire, so many other empires which he mentioned, they collapsed because they could not keep pace with the modern times, with the new inventions. For example, the Ottomans, they could not manufacture the bigger vessels. They could not develop a modern navy, actually. The Mughals, they never had a navy. And other things also. Not just the military thing, economic things also. So unless you don't keep yourself abreast with the changing times, you cannot go into a modern society. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us several lessons. One lesson which it has taught us is about good governance. So governance is not about quantity of government, it is about the quality of government. For example, some of the countries, though they were very rich and very affluent, such as United States and China and European countries, their health system collapsed because the governance structure could not cope with the sudden emergency. So the American bureaucracy, the Congress, Donald Trump at that time, they could not cope with the things. Some other countries, they did better. The Scandinavian countries, incidentally, they were having women leaders actually. Germany, Angela Merkel was the Chancellor. And many of the other Scandinavian countries, they did much better. So I think modernity in the 21st century means good governance also. And it is the quality of the government and the quality of the bureaucracy which will be important. The other is the digital world. So many young people, they are sitting here. Even before COVID-19, we were living in a digital world. Our mobile phones, they are our computers. The smartphones, they are our computers. but it was the attitude. The last obstacle to a digital world was the attitude of the people. COVID-19 helped us in changing that attitude. It helped us overcome the obstacle, the last obstacle. Earlier we were not thinking of online conferences or hybrid conferences. If we used to organize a conference, we were expecting somebody will come from the United States, he will come from Europe, he will be present. This was not coming to our mind actually. Though we were having video conferencing earlier also, but not in this way now we are having. So of course in all these things issues are always there, time factor and other things are there. There may be night there and maybe day here. So in all cases it may not be practical. But definitely it has helped us towards a digital world. Online teaching, online learning, distance education. And I think all these things, they definitely will help women empowerment also. So recently I went to Saudi Arabia in one of the alumni meet in Riyadh. So people, they were saying that AMU should also open its online courses, more online courses. Well, online it is something which is universal. You don't have to open there, it is from your institution. The main thing which they are saying that there are many women here who are homemakers, and it is difficult for them at this stage to go to colleges and other things because they have to take care of so many things in their household. But they are all very keen now to learn more and to do online courses, not just for any employment, but also as an interest and as a hobby. So I think moving towards the digital world, and all of us, especially the young people, it is their responsibility and duty to embrace the digital world. You should all do. So that will help us attain the true modernity in the 21st century. And we all have to move forward with the scientific thought, scientific knowledge. And as Abdul Wasi Sahab and MJ Akbar Sahab had said, that Aligarh Muslim University is the first modern institution in the Oriental world. So this I am not saying, or they are not saying, it is a Scottish philosopher who said this. That Aligarh Muslim University was the first, Sir founded the first modern institution in the Oriental world. Why? Because of the scientific thinking, free thinking. Because now everything is based on evidence-based knowledge. Whatever we are saying, there should be some evidence of that. Whether it is a drug discovery or any other knowledge which we are gaining, everything has to be evidence. So all of us have to move forward in a scientific manner, in a rational manner, with a rational thinking. But history is always important. And this is why I think MJ Akbar was so much, his knowledge of history is of course phenomenal. But I think that's why he was saying so many things about history also. Because without history you are in a vacuum. So history helps you to move forward, to rectify the past mistakes, to help you change courses, to adopt new routes. So history, I think, is one of the most important aspects for any nation, for any community, for any caste. So everybody has a history, whether it is a university, it is a college, it is a family, it is a country, continent. So history has so many aspects. History is not just war. It is about how people they were living together peacefully and coexisting with each other. How they are made progress, what was the agricultural history, what was the economic history. So history has so many aspects. Warfare is just one small aspect of history. So he was stressing on this also. So I am sure that all of us have learnt a lot from his lecture, and it is always a pleasure to listen to him. And I once again congratulate Akbar Sahab and Sirajuddin Qureshi Sahab and the other members of the Khusro Foundation. I once again thank them for giving me an opportunity to be part of this occasion. Thank you so much.
अब मैं गुजारिश कर रहा हूँ जनाब सिराजुद्दीन कुरैशी साहब से कि वो इंडिया इस्लामिक कल्चर सेंटर के सदर की हैसियत से भी, खुसरो फाउंडेशन के डायरेक्टर की हैसियत से भी, फाउंडर डायरेक्टर की हैसियत से भी क्या मैं शुक्रिया अदा करें, मेहमानों का भी और आप सबका भी।
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया भाई। इस स्टेज पे बैठे हुए मोहतरम जनाब MG अकबर साहब, मोहतरम जनाब प्रोफेसर तारिक मंसूर साहब और मेरे अजीज़ भाई जनाब अख्तर वासिफ साहब, यहाँ तशरीफ़ लाए तमाम मौजूद मेहमानान, ख़वातीन हज़रात और बच्चों। बैठे बैठे मैं सोच रहा था कि साइंस ने आदमी को कमज़ोर कर दिया है या मजबूत कर दिया है। क्योंकि एक बार जब मैं स्कूल में पढ़ता था तो टॉपिक आया साइंटिफिक इन्वेंशंस है वीकेंड मैन, तो वो आदमी को कमज़ोर किया या आदमी को मजबूत किया। आज हम मॉडर्निटी की बात करते हैं, अकबर भाई ने बहुत ज़बरदस्त रोशनी डाली और काबिल तारीफ़ बात यह है कि उन्होंने हर टॉपिक को उसके अंदर कवर कर लिया। हिस्ट्री एक अजीब सब्जेक्ट है कि जिसने हिस्ट्री पढ़ी हो, मैं समझता हूँ कि वो पास्ट, प्रेजेंट और फ्यूचर तीनों में चला जाता है। आज के ज़माने में अब मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री की बात आती है, सर जब से हम कॉलेज में गए मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री के बारे में सुनते आए हैं, लेकिन अभी तक मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री ही है, उसके अंदर और क्या ऐड हुआ ये मालूम नहीं। तो हिस्ट्री चली आ रही है और हम लोग हिस्ट्री के साथ ही जुड़े हुए हैं। आज ज़माना जो है वो बहुत ही ज़्यादा तेज़ी रफ्तारी से आगे बढ़ रहा है। अभी जैसे मोबाइल टेलीफोन की बात हुई, इसके अलावा और जितनी नई इन्वेंशंस हैं उनकी बात हुई। सर आगे आने वाले टाइम में मोबाइल के अलावा पता नहीं क्या आने वाला है। जब तक मोबाइल टेलीफोन नहीं आया था मार्केट के अंदर, इन्होंने साइंटिस्ट ने इसको नहीं इन्वेंट किया था, तो मालूम भी नहीं था किसी को। एक छोटा सा रेडियो निकला था जो बगैर वायर के रेडियो चलता था, छोटा सा, वो भी एक बड़ी अजीब सी चीज़ होती थी हमारे लिए उस वक्त, हम छोटे होते थे। आहिस्ता आहिस्ता आप टेलीफोन भी ये नहीं है, हर थोड़े दिन के बाद टेलीफोन के अंदर भी नई नई चीज़ें जो है वो आती रहती हैं। तो मॉडर्न लाइफ जो इतनी हो गई है सर, उसके बगैर शायद हमारा ज़िंदा रहना मुश्किल हो जाएगा। लेकिन इसने रिश्तों को तोड़ दिया है। जो हमारे असली रिश्ते हैं बच्चों के साथ, वालिदैन के साथ, बड़ों के साथ, उसको तोड़ दिया है। उसके फ़ायदे भी हुए हैं, नुकसानात भी हुए हैं। लेकिन आपने तो खैर हर चीज़ के ऊपर रोशनी डाल दी, चाहे वो बादशाहत हो, चाहे वो दूसरी हुकूमतें हों। आपने हिस्ट्री की हर चीज़ को अपने उसमें ले लिया। इस तरह आपकी हर बात को मैं भी एंडोर्स करता हूँ और तारिक मंसूर साहब ने भी आपकी बहुत सारी बातों को जो है सराहा है, अख्तर वासिफ साहब ने भी बहुत ज़्यादा सराहा है। मैं समझता हूँ आज की इस तकरीब के अंदर जितने यहाँ लोग तशरीफ़ लाए हैं वो इस लेक्चर से पूरा फ़ायदा उठाने की कोशिश करेंगे। और यही नहीं, हम लोग कोशिश करते हैं इंडिया इस्लामिक कल्चर सेंटर खुसरो फाउंडेशन के बैनर के नीचे इस तरह के प्रोग्राम जो है वो लगातार होते रहें। और हम इसके लिए हमेशा कोशिश करते रहते हैं कि आप लोगों को ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा बुला के यहाँ पे इन तमाम चीज़ों से रूशनास कराएँ जो हमारी हिस्ट्री हमको बताती है या जो हिस्ट्रीज़ के बारे में लोग नहीं जानते हैं। तो मैं समझता हूँ आज का लेक्चर काफ़ी मुफीद रहा اور میں اپنے ان تمام عزیزان کا، مہمانوں کا خاص طور پہ شکریہ ادا کرتا ہوں، اکبر صاحب کا، منصور صاحب کا، کہ انہوں نے آج ہمارے اس پروگرام میں شمولیت حاصل کرنے کے بعد ہم کو روشناس کرایا بہت ساری چیزوں سے، اور ہم کو اس کا فائدہ اٹھانا چاہیے. خاص طور پہ نئی جنریشن اور اسٹوڈنٹس ہمارے یہاں بیٹھے ہیں، ان کو اس کا پورا فائدہ اٹھانا چاہیے. ان الفاظ کے ساتھ میں پھر آپ کا ایک بار شکریہ ادا کرتا ہوں، خاص طور پہ اپنے مہمانوں کا شکریہ ادا کرتا ہوں، اور آپ کو دعوت دیتا ہوں کہ آپ کھانے پہ تشریف لائیں، آرام سے جائیں، کیونکہ بہت جلدی نہیں ہے. کھانے کے اندر بے صبری کا استعمال نہ کریں. بہت بہت شکریہ.